Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Sandra Ortega. I'm very happy to be here today representing Spain and Cuatrecasas in this case, in this country session. I had the pleasure to meet Kita representative in the Mobile World Congress in Spain, taking place in Barcelona last February this year. And it was a pleasure to have the opportunity to meet Kita and to have the opportunity today to be here and explain, well, in this case, the overview of the startup ecosystem and also how Korean and international startups can do business in Spain. I hope that many startups and businesses here are interested in this market because it's the perfect bridge also to Latin America and Europe and also Africa. So it's a very interesting market not only for businesses interested in Spain but also interested in the rest of Europe and also Latin America. I will start doing a brief introduction about Cuatrecasas. Cuatrecasas is one of the main Spanish law firms. We are present in 12 countries and our main focuses are Spain, Portugal and Latin America, as I will be explaining. We practice in all areas of law and we have over 1,000 lawyers represented in many countries with 24 nationalities and 17 offices. We have a different approach in terms of implementing cutting-edge technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence, both in terms of efficiencying our processes and also advising our clients in these new technologies because we believe it's the future. And we also foster open innovation. This means that we collaborate with startups and with the global ecosystem. And in fact, to show that this is a big approach in our firm, we launched an acceleration program for startups. So what we do is that startups participating in our program get to know more the ecosystem, and we facilitate them finding new clients and also investment. And we help them from both the legal scenario in Spain, so we facilitate them entering the Spanish market, but also we try to work with legal tech startups to efficient also our processes and to facilitate that they find a client in our firm. This is why last year we were granted or awarded as the most innovative European firm by the Financial Times, and mainly amongst other initiatives it was because of the acceleration program I was mentioning. And we are open not only to Spanish startups but also international startups, and we've had Latin American startups, European startups, and we still miss some Asian startups, so it would be great if anyone here would be interested in collaborating and participating with us, mainly in order to enter the Spanish, European or Latin American market. You can also find more information in the website. It is indicated down there. So starting with the Spanish overview, has someone here been in Spain or visiting Spain? Okay. So I will provide a very brief introductory overview first, and then we will start with the startup ecosystem overview. So it's important to consider first that Spain has a unique geostrategic position in terms of being a perfect bridge for Latin America, Africa and the rest of Europe. In terms of Latin America, it's important to consider that due to the historic ties, Spanish startups have invested in many sectors in Latin America, and that's why we have an important imprint there. And in terms of the European Union, Spain entered the European Union in the year 1986. We are the fifth economy in the euro. We have almost 47 million inhabitants and around 78 million tourists in the year 2018. Regarding the language, it's important to mention that there are over 577 million speakers of the Spanish language, which is also worth considering. And regarding GDP, in 2018 it was it rose to 2.7%. With respect to 2017, it is expected to be approximately 2.4% for the year 2019, and the increase for the following 2 years is expected to be in 2.3%. It's also important to consider that Spain ranks among the top 10 countries with best infrastructure quality worldwide. And regarding the Spain legal system, it's a parliamentary monarchy with 3 independent branches: the executive, the parliament, which has the legislative power with 2 houses, the lower house and the upper house, and the judiciary, which is represented by independent judges. We have the highest court with the Supreme Court, and then the Constitutional Court, which is independent to the judiciary and has the authority to interpret the Constitution. And then we have also the King, which is the representative of the state in international relations. It's also important to consider that the impact that the European Union legislation has in the Spanish legal system, as it represents a substantial part of the commercial law system. So, entering the startup ecosystem overview, in Spain we have these are dates about 2018, so last year, for over 4,000 startups, with the 2 main hubs in Madrid and Barcelona. Though it's also true that there are several cities like Valencia and Bilbao, which are also increasingly becoming hubs in Spain. And this is very relevant because in terms of the European Union, we are the only country that has 2 hubs among the most recognized in the European Union. Both Madrid and Barcelona rank 4th and 5th position in the top 10 European hubs. And regarding the business models and industries, we have the top business models are marketplaces, e-commerce and mobile apps. And regarding industries, the first ones would be home, health and wellness, transportation and travel, and then the 3 followings are enterprise software, marketing and fintech. Fintech is a very growing market in Spain. It's also worth mentioning that startups in Spain are also focusing on the global market because they can see that they have more possibilities of succeeding if they focus on the global market, not only on the Spanish market. Regarding the developer density, it's one of the most growing ecosystems in Europe. We are the second, Spain ranks second in Europe for growth of developers community, which is very relevant for us. Also, the workforce is very competitive in cost compared to other jurisdictions in Europe. You can see here the cost in Spain compared to other countries, and in particular the comparison is very high with regards to countries in the US. And also here we can see how also Spain not only has a lot of potential in terms of talent, but it's also exporting a lot of talent to the rest of the European Union and also outside of Europe, which is also very, very relevant for the country. As you can see here, we are the 4th largest exporter of talent to other European countries. And regarding venture capital in Spain, we have, so the investment volume has skyrocketed with respect to the previous year, 2017, amounting to almost 1.4 billion euros. This has been because Spanish scale-ups have raised very important capital in this last year, with rounds of over 29 rounds of over 10 million euros, and with 34 exits, which is very relevant. And here you can find the startups that have made the most relevant rounds in Spain last year, which are on the first place Letgo. Letgo is a second-hand marketplace. Cabify, I don't know if maybe you have heard about this name, it's the Spanish version of Uber. Then we have Globo, which is very similar to Deliveroo. I don't know if you know Deliveroo, right? Okay, well it's the Spanish version of Deliveroo too. Then we have TravelPerk. TravelPerk is a regional transport platform. Spot-a-Home is an online rental platform also in Spain. Isalud is similar to TripAdvisor, but applied to medical insurance. OnTrack is a regional transportation platform. Then we have Devo. Devo is a cybersecurity data analytics platform. Hawkers is a sunglasses brand that has been very popular in Spain, selling and distributing online. And finally we have Fiverr, which is a data-led entertainment platform in Spain in order to find social events around the different cities, which has also been very popular in the last year. This has amounted to almost 50% increase with respect to the capital invested in the previous year, which is a very relevant number, and which determines the increase and the growth of the capital invested in Spain with respect to European countries. And this is the last slide to show that Spanish cities lead the list of the top 15 European countries in terms of capital invested. With the positions, in particular Barcelona is very relevant in the 5th position. So now we're going to start to focus on the doing business part of the presentation. This is more focused for businesses or startups with interest in entering the Spanish market, because it provides some guidelines in terms of regulatory constraints or matters in terms of labor, tax implications, and corporate implications, amongst others. So, in terms of setting up a business in Spain, there are two common options of entering the Spanish market. The first one, so there's both related to limited companies, but there are two options in terms of limited companies. There are public limited companies and private limited companies. So in both cases, both types of businesses have their own legal personality separate from the one of the partners, which is important in terms of the partners not being personally liable from the company's debts. The differences between one and the other is represented mainly depending on the type of business. So in the case of small and medium enterprises, the best option normally is the private limited companies because of the lower capital requirements, and also because of the statutory restrictions in terms of transfer of quotas, as well as in terms of the more flexibility and autonomy in terms of organizing the business. And in contrast, the larger corporations tend to incorporate as public limited companies, because the capital in this case is represented in shares, and this allows also the capital to be listed on stock exchange and allows a more easy transmission of the capital. As an alternative, so there are other options. We can incorporate in Spain through a branch or through a representative office, or there are also other alternatives like joint ventures or economic interest groupings, and also joint account agreements. So in terms of incorporating, there are also two options. You can incorporate a new business from zero, or you can acquire a shelf company, which is more expensive, but it's also easier or quicker if you have time constraints. The requirements are different. So in the first case, incorporating a limited company from zero, so you have to have obviously powers of attorney in Spanish before a public notary and duly apostilled in accordance with the Hague Convention procedure. You have to be approved by the corresponding register regarding the clearance of the company name. Also, both partners and also the company have to file for a tax identification number and also for the census for the tax filings. Also, the company has to have a bank account in Spain in order to be able to comply with the cash contributions, which are, in the case of the privately limited company, 3,000 euros, and in the case of the public limited company, 16,000 euros. So the difference is relevant. That's why small companies tend to incorporate as a private limited company. Also, obviously, you have to incorporate through the public deed before the notary public and file the public deed with the commercial registry. And there's also a quick, let's say, a simplified procedure for registration or incorporation of startup companies. This has been very relevant in the last years in Spain, and the government and the parliament are promoting and trying to reduce the bureaucracy in terms of incorporation especially for startups. And there's a new regime that is going to come into force this year probably. So it's going to be more simple and more digitalized. So it's going to facilitate online registration and incorporation for businesses in Spain. And in terms of shelf companies, in this case, well, the seller and the purchaser have to enter or formalize the sell and purchase deed with the public notary. There's also this simplified procedure for startups, which is the foreign investment filings, especially for foreign companies. Then, in most cases, the shelf companies are registered by a single member. So this is something that has to be changed in the public deed. So it's important to consider this point. And there are other corporate acts that have to be taken into account, but I don't want to extend too much in this point. There's also relevant areas to have in mind. In this case, it's antitrust regulation both in Spain and in the European Union. There are three main areas to be considered. The first one is restrictive practices. So as a general rule, collusive practices, abuse of dominant position and significant acts of unfair competition are generally prohibited in Spain and in Europe as a whole. Also, we have to consider the prior notification and authorization required for mergers and concentrations. And finally, acts of unfair competition, which are also prohibited as a general rule. And acts in this case include confusion, misleading advertising, amongst others. Also, a very relevant point, especially in terms of technology companies in Europe, is state aid. You've probably heard cases in Ireland with big technology companies incorporating in Ireland and having this type of issues with the European Commission. So it's important to have this in mind when entering the European market. So in general, this type of acts are prohibited, but it's also true that you can also try and speak with the European Commission, and in some cases these type of acts are also authorized under certain conditions, but it's always relevant to bear this type of cases in mind. In terms of intellectual property and data protection, regarding this latter, I'm sure you all know the famous GDPR regulation in Europe. It entered into force in the 25th of May of 2018. And also the Spanish regulation has adapted to the GDPR in Spain. And this regulation is very protective of data subjects and establishes highly demanding obligations for both data controllers and data processors in the whole European Union. And in terms of intellectual property, this term in English in Spain includes two types of rights. On the first hand, we have copyright and related rights, and on the second hand, we have industrial property rights, which includes trademarks, industrial designs, patents, and also utility models. In this slide, you can see the differences in the main rights. The one in the middle, which is copyrights, in terms of, so you know it protects the original creations of authors. And the term of protection is the life of the author plus 70 years after its death. The register, there's not a mandatory register obligation, because in this case the right is considered to protect the author from the moment it is created, but it is true that it is recommended in many cases to protect these rights upon the registry, because in cases such as software or databases, it's in many cases relevant for the company to make sure that it is protected with these rights, and to make sure that these rights are not in the employees but in the company. So this is something that normally helps companies to protect in this case, software rights. It's also relevant to mention that a difference, for instance, from the American regulation. In America, in many cases, software is protected through patent. In Europe, this is not possible, so you can only protect software and databases under copyright. In terms of trademarks, the term of protection is indefinite, though this registration must be renewed every 10 years. And you can protect trademarks both in all Europe and also only in Spain. And regarding patents, the protection is for 20 years. The main requirements are novelty, an invention step, and also an industrial application. And you can also protect the patent both in the whole European Union or only in Spain. Regarding real estate, foreign investment is liberalized, so there's not constraints for foreign investments in real estate in Spain. It's important to consider that these transactions can be structured in two ways. They can be structured as asset deals, which means that the investor invests only in the real estate. And also they can be structured as share deals, which means that the investor invests not only on the real estate, but also on the company which owns this real estate. Both structures are common, but there are differences in terms especially of tax impact, also due diligence efforts and risk assumptions. In these two last cases, these requirements are more relevant in the cases of share deals, because you have to bear in mind not only the real estate but also obviously the company. And in this case, it's also relevant to bear in mind the registry. because registering these transmissions are relevant in terms of providing good faith for the purchaser and protecting the acquisition before third parties. And also it's relevant in cases of providing securities like pledges or mortgages. It's very important to register these securities in order for these securities to be enforceable, directly enforceable before third parties. Otherwise, they won't be directly enforceable. Regarding taxation, in Spain we have to consider several types of taxes. The first one is the corporate income tax. The corporate income tax is levied on the worldwide income obtained by companies registered or resident in Spain. So the consideration of a company as tax resident in Spain is when the company is incorporated under Spanish law, or the company has its head office registered in Spain, or if its effective management headquarters are in Spain. And the rate is currently fixed at the 25%, though in the cases of newly created companies, this tax rate is established at 50% for the first tax period the company has a positive taxable base, and for the following year. So it's for 2 years the company has a reduced rate of 50%. We also have to bear in mind the personal income tax. This is the tax that is levied over individuals that are tax residents in Spain. So to be considered a tax resident in Spain, a person has to spend more than 183 days as a resident in Spain during the whole calendar year, or it's also considered when the individual has the main center or base of its business in Spain. The tax rates range between the 19% and the 45%, though these percentages may differ considering the different regional areas in Spain. Regarding the non-resident income tax, this tax is levied on Spanish sourced income by non-residents in Spain. And there's also a fixed tax rate, general fixed tax rate fixed in the 24%. And then depending on the capital sources, the rates vary, but it's mainly 19% in most cases. And there are some cases in which there's a tax exemption, for instance, in the case of royalties. And to end the taxation presentation, we have the value-added tax, which in Spain is fixed at the 21%, and there's a 10% rate for a number of protected transactions, and also a 4% rate in the cases of certain goods, primary goods and services of public interest. And finally, we have transfer tax, which applies for property transfers and some corporate events, and also stamp duty, which considers the tax levied on the issuance of public deeds and so on. Now we are going to consider the labor implications. So, in terms of types of employment, the general rule is to have a permanent or fixed-term contract. A permanent full-time contract, employment contract. In some cases, the fixed-term contracts are also valid, but under certain and justified situations, because it's not the ideal type of contract. In terms of salary, In Spain, the official minimum wage is fixed at 900 euros per month or 30 euros per day, though this minimum wage varies in terms of the different professional groups, so it can be modified in collective bargaining agreements. In terms of working time, the maximum number of working hours in Spain is 40 hours. Also, as a general rule, overtime must not exceed 18 hours per year, and obviously it has to be compensated for money or for bank holidays. In terms of changes in labor conditions, companies are allowed to modify the labor conditions in certain circumstances. The first one is functional mobility, which means that an employee can be modified in the type of work, always that it is in the same professional group. And the second one is geographical mobility, which means that employees can be moved from different offices in different territories in certain cases where the company elects organizational and economic circumstances, special circumstances, and also when there are substantial modification of employment conditions such as working time can also be modified for these organizational and economic circumstances. So now we are going to continue in a minute with the employment part, but it's important that if you are having any type of question, that you can type your questions now and we can answer them at the end of the presentation, if that is okay with everyone. So, coming back to the labor issues, we have termination of employment. So, termination of employment in Spain, as a general rule, requires a cause, though it is true that in some cases employers can dismiss employees without a cause or without insufficient cause, but only in several predetermined cases. And the grounds for the general rule, which is termination for cause, are individual redundancies, collective redundancies, and also obviously disciplinary termination. In terms of transfer of undertakings, when for instance a company is, or an investor is acquiring a Spanish company, it's very relevant to consider that the employees will prevail and will continue with the same conditions as with the previous owner. So when an investor acquires a Spanish company, it's important to bear in mind that the workforce will continue with the same conditions as with the prior owner. And the new acquirer assumes the position of employer for the employees. In terms of collective representation and organizational rights, it's very important to consider that in Spain, trade unions are very relevant and have a very predominant position in organizations. And they have a consultation purpose in many decisions of the employer. In terms of registration and social security issues, foreign employers must obviously be registered as employers with the Spanish tax authorities and social security authorities in order to be able to employ in Spain. And also, lastly, it's important to consider the health and safety at work considerations. This is a very short mention to regulated sectors. It's also very important in Spain to consider that there are some regulated sectors, and in particular, the main ones are the ones indicated here, which are financial entities and investment companies, energy, insurance, and lastly, technology, media, and telecommunications. This means, in the last case, in the case of the technology industry, it's important that when you are operating networks and providing electronic communications, you have to abide to some regulatory requirements in terms of notification of an authorization by the corresponding authority. And also it's very important to consider that for notification purposes, you have to appoint a resident in Spain. And lastly, I wanted to mention the dispute settlement issues in Spain. Jurisdiction in Spain is determined in terms of mainly subject matter and territory. In the case of subject matter, for instance, if you consider intellectual property issues, there are specialized tribunals in this area of law. So in some cases, depending on the subject matter, the type of tribunals may vary. It's also very important to bear in mind that in Spain there are several appeal courts. So normally first instance and second instance are provisionally enforceable because they are appealable. So it's possible to be able to appeal before a third instance, which can be, for instance, mainly the Supreme Court. Also, there are two types of civil and commercial declaratory procedures, which are ordinary procedures and oral trials. The difference between both is that in most cases you would be before an ordinary procedure or an oral trial in terms of the amount, so the amount in dispute. In terms of enforcement procedures, as mentioned before with the securities, these public instruments that are documents issued before a notary public are directly enforceable, so you don't need to attend before a court for them to be enforceable. They are directly enforceable. And lastly, it's worth mentioning that in Spain there's a long-standing culture of arbitration, which means that arbitration is very common in Spain, and it's very respected by the judiciary. So Spanish judicial case law respects this attribution and only sets aside arbitral awards for reasons listed in the arbitration act. And this is everything. So, well, you have my email address, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions and to be in touch with you. If you're interested in entering the Spanish market or the European market or Latin American market also, I'm very happy to speak with you. I will be here today and tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us a great opportunity to know about the current situation of the investment area in Latin America. So I believe you have some questions from the floor, maybe one question. So through the Slido. So would you please answer about the questions from the floor? What is the positive impact of MWC to Spanish startup ecosystem?
Well, I mentioned before the Mobile World Congress because I think, so for me, for instance, and I'm not a startup, but I've assisted the Mobile World Congress for several years. And it's very interesting because you have international representation, and this allows a lot of networking, and for instance, me being able to be here today. So I think it has a lot of opportunities for everyone, and especially for startups, because they can meet a lot of investors there at an international level, which is not very common on a daily basis. So for startups, well, maybe if you don't know, in Spain we have two events in the Mobile World Congress, or related with the Mobile World Congress. We have the Mobile World Congress itself, which is more focused on on technology developments that year. But then we also have the 4 years from now, which is the startup event, which is very interesting and is having each year more recognition in terms of the startup ecosystem, because for startups it allows a lot of international recognition and positioning. And regarding the Mobile World Congress itself, it's very interesting also to see and to learn about the technology developments, especially mobile. And there are also many events and presentations of acceleration programs and many initiatives that are very relevant for the international ecosystem and also for Spain. So in terms of the Spanish ecosystem, I would say it's very relevant for a positioning of the Spanish products and services, and in order to be able to meet network at an international level.
So I should interpret a little bit, maybe summarize. 스페인에도 모바일 콩그레스라고 이렇게 스타트업과 벤처 창업 기업들이 함께하는 그 컨퍼런스가 있기는 한데 이제 더 그 기술적인 면에 굉장히 집중을 해서 함께하는 국제 페어라고 합니다. 그리고 이곳에서 이렇게 국제적으로 함께 피칭을 할 수 있는 기회를 갖고 있는 이런 페어들이 열리고 있는 데 대해서 굉장히 흥미롭게 생각한다고 말씀을 주셨습니다. So I'd like to say this is, even though this is the first time to hold for the fair, for technology fair with a bunch of enterprises and startups, it will be the biggest one here in Korea. So please let your people know in Spain. So,
of course.
and during our dialogue, we have one more questions here. So, any company that you're interested in Korea?
It's a very good question. I would like to have the chance today and tomorrow to see all the startups and businesses that are here. I had the chance yesterday to visit a Korean law firm, which is Yoon and Yang. I'm not sure if I pronounce it properly. And for me that was very interesting also to see and to meet lawyers, Korean lawyers, and also to meet the only Spanish lawyer that is practicing here in Korea, which is very interesting also. So yes, my idea is to have the chance these 2 days to meet companies and see if there's any interest in entering the Spanish and the European and Latin American market. That would be a great news, because I think that's something that we have to promote. Because I think there's still not that much relation or collaboration between Spain and Korea, and I think that there's a lot of space for that to happen.
It means that there will be the great possibility to cooperate and to work between Korea and Spain, and hoping to find another new partner here in Korea. 아무래도 이제 로이어니까요. 이곳에서 좀 둘러봤는데 지금 발음이 정확하지 않다고 뮤니캉이라는 회사의 그 로이어를 만나봤는데 이제 그 회사와 처음 만나봤고 그것이 좀 특별했다는 말씀을 해주셨고, 유럽이나 라틴 아메리카 쪽에 또 관심 있는 분들께서는 언제든지 연락 주시면 함께 일을 하고 싶은 마음이 있다고 하십니다. 왜냐하면 한국과 스페인의 경우에는 또 포커할 수 있었던 일들이 그렇게 많지 않았기 때문에 함께 파트너를 찾고 있다는 말씀도 해주셨습니다. So the last question is written by Korean. So is there any special way to go to the overseas, especially in Europe, as the startup of venture enterprises? Do you think?
Okay, so I explained before there's an online simplified procedure for entering in Spain in terms of startups and foreign companies. But as I also mentioned, this system is changing, and there's a lot of interest from the Spanish government in implementing a system that is easier for foreign companies. So I'm happy to explain when this changes, because it still has not been implemented, but hopefully it will be implemented this year. I'm more than happy to share these implications for foreign companies and for startups.
좀 전에 말씀드린 대로 이제 온라인을 이용하는 방법으로 함께 진출을 할 수 있겠다라는 말씀을 해주셨고요. 스페인도 역시 이러한 방법으로 조금 더 국제적인 관계를 이어나갔으면 좋겠다는 말씀도 함께 해주셨습니다. So thank you very much. Maybe time's up. Of course, 5 minutes left, but yes, it's almost time. So thank you very much for your great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
감사합니다.